You didn't turn it off.
Oh, you're on.
Okay. All right. Is that working okay? Okay.
Getting busy.
All right. We're basically, this came about when Mark asked me to try to do a small presentation on essentially the DX commander that we've been using for our phone station for the last several field days. And I went back and looked, and we got our first set of polls. They were shipped in April of 2019. So they came in shortly after that. And I don't remember if that was the first time we ran the commander as our phone station or not. It's probably the winter that year, the following year, 2020. But we've run it several times, and it's always been it's been pretty solid. Nobody's had any complaints, and I know Mark Klein's commented a couple of times that a little bit of surprise. I know we had a
Verticals won't work.
Right. Anyway, the classic, of course, the classic understanding of the vertical is that it's a low angle takeoff and it's the DX choice, and it's probably true to a point. Certainly, your surroundings can have an impact on how well that works. But out here, we've had pretty good results with it. Anyway, so next slide. That's me, KA5HFE. I've been actually in 2 weeks, my 4th anniversary of my first contacts coming up, and it was with a little speaker wire dipole threaded through the limbs of 2 trees on my lot. And it was the Indy 500 special event station. That was kind of fun, but that's coming up. Anyway, back. You're running away on me there.
Oh, that was just...
Okay, it's all Mark's fault. He's the one that brought this up. So next.
It's easy in a way.
I have I had a lot of help when I started out from David Kassler and his site. Is a pretty good online Elmer, and I know there's some people that there's a plus or minus. I don't always agree with him, but he did kind of stir stuff up with the DX Commander when he reviewed it recently. And he found out there were a lot of fans out there. And of course, the DX Commander is Callum McCormick, M0MCX. And the basic premise is a multi-band vertical, a fan vertical. Taking the fan dipole, tipping it over on its side, and building independent wires. Resonant, no tuner required, multi-band vertical. I also saw a video by Dennis, VE3BF, and he got me interested in the 20-foot Shakespeare wonder pole, or in this case, the B&M Black Widow, but same pole as there's a handy little vertical, and give it a little bit. Anyway, the thing only weighs 1.5 pounds or so. It folds up easy.
Good carp fishing.
And push come to shove, right? Push come to shove. It's a fishing pole. When I first got this thing, Lyndall, KA5HFE brought his over. His was a Black Widow, and it was configured and rigged with fishing line. And that fishing hook got both of us that day. So I think he took it off since then. But anyway, this little guy is surprising. And I work out of my garage at the moment with my shack. Let's just lay it down for now. consequently, I'd set up in the front yard. It's much easier to do and keep sight of it. So I can set this thing up in about 5 minutes, take it down in 2. So I don't have to leave it out in the front yard. I've left it overnight. Nobody's ever bothered it, but it's very easy to set up, take down, and it'd be a great camping POTA or whatever setup. It is a monoband, but Dennis is the one that got me interested in it. And he does one thing. He did a video where he took one of these and took a 40-meter wire, 33 feet, and he just wound it around the entire pole so that the 33 feet were stretched in a coil, fed it with a 4-to-1 ballon, and made DX contacts with it. And that's really what got me interested in that guy. And I don't really know which one of these came first. It's a chicken and egg thing, the Commander or this guy, but I think the Commander did. But additionally, Peter Waters of Waters and Stanton, that's the UK ham dealer. Peter does a lot of stuff on small garden, small backyard antenna solutions. And he did one where he took a pole and just attached it to his fence post and took a single counterpoise and stretched it across the fence. And it like no footprint in the yard at all. And he had and I think he did a 20-meter at that time. Next slide, please. So the crappie poles are the Shakespeare Wonder Pole or the B&M Black Widow. Walmart, Amazon, B&M poles, or the last time I ordered was Cabela's, have had the poles, and they're available in 20, 17, 16 and a half, 13, 10 foot. So if you're building a high band, one of the higher frequency band antennas, you could buy a smaller pole and make it even easier to set up. And if all else fails, you can go fishing. Okay, next, please. Okay, if we take your standard dipole and you pull it down and stick your center conductor straight up in the counterpoise or shield element horizontally, you might get a SWR looking a little bit like the next slide. And that is this pole, not perfectly tuned, but in the configuration where it is where the counterpoise is stretched out horizontally about 2 feet off the ground. If you get out on the end of it, move it up and down ever so slightly, you can fine tune that rather nicely. So it makes it very easy to set up and tune. Okay, next slide. This is this pole basically set up with a single counterpoise at 2 feet for about 30 minutes on WhisperNet, which is probably what, 3 transmissions maybe? If that every 10, yeah. So it was only up very briefly. And it pretty much hits East Coast, West Coast, Canada, and Hawaii on 1 watt. So 1 radial, 1 counterpoise. And the common wisdom is you need 30, 60, 120 radials to make a vertical work. Maybe not. So it's just a thought. It's 16 and a half feet. It matches, it's a matched. It's a 16 and a half foot nominal 20-meter element.
Kind of like an L, right?
Yeah, it's essentially an L. But if it's off the ground and tuned, you get pretty darn good results with it. And I've had I contacted a special event station in Newfoundland with it, and I've had south of the border, of course, the East Coast, West Coast, Florida, and so it really does work pretty good for no more than it is. I mean, you just can't get much simpler than that, except maybe hanging it from a tree instead of having the pole. But no doubt that a good radial field will improve the performance, but is that enough? It might be all you need most days. Okay, and there it is. I might be marketing this, I'm not sure. That is actually the same wire set, and SWR looked exactly the same. It was offset maybe 100 hertz, but you don't necessarily have to have a lot of fancy equipment to get an antenna in the air. But if you do something like that, you do need to guy it up a little higher, because it lasted about 5 minutes and the wind took it down. Anyway, but it was fun while it lasted.
That's a gutter, right?
That's the gutter.
Plastic gutter?
Yes, sir.
I've actually seen him do it. Go make some of this crap. You know, and he said, hey, I can just use that.
Okay. All right, now back to the DX Commander. That's your basic pole. Pardon?
So you notice the front yard is not like anybody else's. You got a little extra space there.
Well, yeah, there is. The first time I took the shot, it lined up with the telephone pole, the power pole behind it perfectly, and it had the power lines coming out of it. I've had 5 squirrels commit suicide on top of that thing. 2 of them set the yard on fire, and 1 the pole, but which surprised me. The fire department, and I don't know if there's anybody in here that they sprayed that sucker down from the ground because the top was burning, and I'm thinking that seems dangerous, but he walked away from it. But anyway, the basic DX, is internet still dead? Yeah, that's okay. Well, we'll deal with it. Okay. The basic kit, let's take, okay, the next slide. Okay, all right. This is designed to have up to 6 vertical elements, and this one apparently I had my 80 wire on there. It's normally it's configured with 40, 30, 20, 17, 12, and 10, with 40 giving you a match on 15. And you may pick up 6. It depends on just the combinations and how it all goes together, but very little need for a tuner on this. At least no more than the onboard tuner on most of the modern radios, and in most cases, no tuner at all. Okay, next slide. That's my normal configuration. I usually put 3 wires on it. It's easy to set, easier to handle. It's easy to set up, quick to set up, and it gives me 40, 20, 15, and 10 meter with a really decent match at oh, I don't know, 1.2 to 1 or better on all 4 bands. And that's a cheap, basically that was a $75 pole and a $40 set of plates and a bunch of scrap wire and such. The plate kit that comes with the antenna, well, the plate kit, if you order it, that comes with the antenna, it includes the grounding plate and the mounting plate for the SO239, a driven plate where all of your individual wires are attached, and then some guide plates to guide those, whatever selection of wire you choose. And okay, next, please. That's the complete plate set. Next. Okay, when you start stringing this thing and you've got the thing laid out, preferably on some lawn chairs or a couple of sawhorses or something to save your back, the pattern, the whole pattern is a little bit unusual. And if you get one and you want to build one, if you make it easy to see if the plates are aligned, it makes it so much easier to string it all out without getting it twisted and end up with the odd spacing. Next. Okay, next. Okay. Basically, he's configured this thing where it will take from 1 to 6 wires, but the 2-wire, 3-wire, 4-wire, and 6-wire configurations can be evenly spaced with the selection of holes that are available. And that's when keeping them all in alignment comes to play. When I hooked up the radial set for this, after taking it down a couple of times, I decided I'd like to disconnect it quickly. So I took some Anderson power poles and hooked up all the radials in bundles with a simple power pole connection so I could take it down really quick and put it in the shop if it's really, really bad weather. If we have a known real bad storm, it's only minutes to lay it down, pull the 3 wires loose and run for cover. But the first one I had spent pretty much all of 3 years in the backyard with I think it had 2 or 3 months break in that time frame, and it's held up really well. It is a fiberglass pole, and if you don't protect the joints, I got one that's not coming down there. You really don't want to get any water in there in the winter time. This is a new one. I haven't had it out yet. So originally, the section joints were secured using hose clamps. And Callum has changed his mind on that now, but basically you'd expand the antenna out. This one's easier to see right now till you got to a point where you put the hose clamp on the top section, not on the bottom section, and snug it down. You got a lot of mechanical advantage with the hose clamp, and these are just thin fiberglass walls. So you can crush it if you really get too enthusiastic when you clamp it down. You basically just don't want it to spin, just get it just barely tight enough. Well, now they figured out that you can do it without the clamps. And let's take the next slide, or 2 or 3 maybe.
I do have access to this website.
Okay. Okay, that's next. You're going to need some line, some shock cord or blow line. If you got some of that nylon line, when you put 6 wires in the air and you start to trim all the wires, you spend a lot of time setting this thing up and down. And it's easy to do, but it's still tedious. You just stretch some of the nylon line up to one of the higher plates and back down and raise it, use it to hoist each of the wires you're tuning. You don't have to take the pole down. You can just lower them down, adjust the length, hoist it back up. Once you get all of the lengths adjusted, they're interactive. So you can have a very subtle change. When you're tuning a 20, it might impact the 40 or the 15. So that way, if you use that to hoist it up and down, you won't spend your whole day setting it up, taking it down. And when you get it finalized, you can put the appropriate terminations on it. Next. Okay. I robbed my grandkids' flat tire bicycle inner tubes to get some of the seals for the joints. And go ahead, next. Anyway, all these things are handy. The butterfly clamp, it lets me operate tool free. I don't have to mess with it. I still like the clamps on some of the joints, but next, please. Yeah, that's the typical inner tube over the joint, and then clamp the hose clamp on there. And one more. Now, pegs, tent pegs. If I found that the Harbor Freight kit on the right, they're about $1 a piece. Actually, maybe a little less. It's a great source for stakes. And next, we're getting pretty close. If you don't buy the whole kit and you want the various clips and such, the Home Depot's got a pretty good assortment of things like that. We just took another shipment of poles, and I don't know how many people bought kits or poles out of that group, but if you don't, if you didn't buy the complete kit, it's pretty easy to fill it in. 6 complete kits?
No, one complete,
One,
5 just poles.
okay. Anyway, I was a cheapskate. I didn't want to pay the price for the whole kit, and I had a lot of stuff kicking around the shop, so I went with with just the pole and the plates. But if we can get to it, let's go to the commander's site.
Okay.
So
Do you find any resonance problem between the different bands when?
they're a little bit interactive. So it's the classic situation. If you go around about 3 times, you're going to be, you can get spot on generally almost everywhere. I've really not had any problems, especially I usually run the 3-wire 4-band arrangement. And interestingly, this quote 10-meter pole is about 9.6 meters, 32 feet or so. And the standard 40-meter, 33-foot wire doesn't quite make the trip. It's too long. So he has a fold over on it, and it actually folds back down almost a meter. It's about 36-foot wire. It's a little bit long, but that 36-foot wire, as it folds over, not unlike maybe a folded dipole, the response on that allows you to actually tune 15 on that 40-meter wire with having minimal impact on actual 40-meter band. Okay, the manuals should be scroll down a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Guides, user guides and manuals. The red button, red button. And scroll down a little on that. Up, no, down. Red button again, 10-meter classic. And now into the guide. The original, well, the 3-year-old guide or so was the one that David Kassler got all annoyed with because it didn't have enough detail for him. And Callum's been back in the manual going through it. He's made a few changes. And that's a pretty good shot of how they finally terminate the element with a carbiner clip and a folded over wire and heat shrink. After you've done hoisting it up and down and getting it tuned, then you go back and set it up like that. And it makes it easy to take the thing apart if you want to take it down. Okay, next. Okay, I'd like to go a little further, keep going. It has all the standard. Okay, more. Looking for the the cut list on it. There we are, right there. Now he's finally put in English's SAE dimensions as well as metric. So if you follow the cut list for each of the wires, you come very, very close. You only have to do minor tuning on it before you finalize it. And the kit comes with self-sealing heat shrink. So when you really use that at the end, you make a good permanent connection. But I found that if you take a little bit of hot glue and a piece of regular heat shrink, you can get almost the same effect. You heat it up real good after you get it, and it's cheaper, and I don't have to go find a special heat shrink for it. The instruction set's really quite good. It's worth a look. That you can just go online and download it. But I just find it interesting that the 40 meter is 36.5 feet, basically 36 feet 9 sixteenths inches. Okay, that's definitely a little longer than you'd expect. He refers to it as a boomerang match, but it does improve the ability to tune the 15 as well as the 40 meter to get both of them on spot on. If you replace the 30 meter wire with an 80 meter wire, you will end up with an inverted L on 80 meters. The newer antenna, the 12 that Ed got, I believe, has a coil midway. They wind a small coil midway and string it straight up on the pole. It doesn't require that inverted L configuration, so it's kind of nice. Keeps it in a small location. So. Okay, next. Back to the slides. I think we're pretty much through the slides, but getting pretty close to the end there, I think. Next. Okay, so this is where the new process for preventing the thing from collapsing comes to play. They now recommend a 3M version of this. The stretch and seal is a knockoff of a 3M temper seal or some such, but it's like a self-vulcanizing tape that doesn't leave the gooey mess that the classic rubber self-vulcanizing tape does. So if you put this on, get the joint out and firm, and then wrap it with this, wrap it with a couple of wraps of traditional electrical tape, and use a tie wrap, zip tie, or in a couple of cases I used some braided fishing line because it's what I had where I was at, and just tie a good tight knot around it that they won't come down. If we put one of these up and we cinch all the joints and we get out here in a typical windy Oklahoma day, it won't take very long until the thing collapses. I know Lyndall and I tried on a winter field day one night in the wind and had to go back out and readjust the SWR several times and putting the poles back in the air. But if you use a little bit of this stuff, and this is at Home Depot has this stuff. It's now about $8. It's gone up probably about 50% in the last 6 months, like everything else, but still pretty cheap. If you don't have a plate kit, if you don't buy a plate kit and you want to set up some kind of guides, the little $2, they were $1, cutting boards are a great material to knock out a guide plate or a guy plate. Or if you're looking to put up a couple of wires, say on a, sure. Yeah, I want one of these. Okay.
Dollar General.
Oh, that one's actually Walmart. Walmart had these. I like these. They're not very thick, but they do the job well, and they were like 99 cents, but I can't find them anymore. If you don't want to have all the guide plates, I didn't mention bungee cords. I love these bungee cords. They're an awesome aid when you're out there trying to put the thing together. If you don't have the circular guide plates and you're only going to run a couple of wires, a piece of that cutting board, a couple of bungee cords, and you've got a good 2-wire, 4-wire, or 6-wire separator for your wires, and without having to go to the trouble of, and that's easy to cut and drill. If you don't, when you get to the end of your wire, if you configure one of these with just a single bungee, it's a good way to tension the wire, connect it, and you're rocking. It's ready to go. Cheap date, very effective.
Bungees are knuckle breakers, so
Oh, but not real bad.
if you slip, you know.
Alternately, I've got a bunch of old interlocking mats for the concrete, you know, the 1/2-inch thick rubber mats. They make a pretty good separator as well. Same scenario. Cut in a disc, and I didn't bring it. I meant to bring one. You can effectively make the plate just by with a box knife in 5 minutes. So you got yourself a set of plates. Again, cheap date. Great for temporary use out in the park or something. I don't doubt they'd probably last for months if I set it out and left it. And bungee cords and inner tubes. Yeah, some pieces of that type of mat that I'm talking about. It's real handy. And what do we have next on that? I don't know. It was kind of late when I finished. I think that was the end of it right there, actually.
Could you use that tape in place of the typical black?
I would use both. That said,
I'm thinking in terms of connectors.
say again,
Using that in place of wrapping connectors with the standard black tape.
for your coax connector,
Yeah.
it's good for a coax seal. It's great for a coax seal. Just wrap it
I've
from
never
the
seen
bottom
that.
up.
I've never seen that before. Just
Yeah.
curious.
It's nice. And it's real stretchy. But I normally, I'm belts, bits and braces. I like the extra electrical over it as well. If you use the old PVC, classical PVC style, whether it's a T-shape or a simple pipe type connector, and you got some of these inner tubes, you can put a raincoat on that puppy, put the tape on there, and stretch the rubber inner tube over it, however long it needs to be to do the job.
And that just diverts the water.
And that just diverts the water around it. And you're not going to have a leak on your cable.
Interesting.
With that thing and one of these poles, a couple of wires, you're off and running. The radial story is kind of bouncing around a little bit here, but the thing on the radials, when you get more than 32 radials out, you're at a point of diminishing returns. If you can get 30, even 10 or 10 foot, 3 meter, or you're going to have a good solid radial field. Our last outing here, we did 20, 16.5 foot radials on the Commander. And we had a good contact with Chile on that rig. So it was getting out okay. Yeah. And
Any other questions for
yeah,
Ken? Any other thoughts?
Which band do the crappie prefer?
pardon?
Which band do the crappie prefer?
Yeah, they like that 20 meter pole. Yeah.
You want Ken Robertson to website or something?
Yeah, let's do that. There's one other, we have another member, Ken, and I didn't see him on there. Was he on today? I didn't see him earlier. He has a vertical solution that's worth looking at. It's a unipole. And yeah, you've got a picture in there. Yeah. And it's a he operates multiple bands with it, and depending on the base coil, 40 or 80 or a number of others, and he set that up for quite a long time. It's the pole's insulated from the ground, and it's probably worth visiting with him on it if you're interested in another potential vertical solution. Anyway, he's had contacts all over on that thing. It doesn't look like much like right there. It looks, you can tell it's been out there living a hard life, but very effective, no tuner. And there's just really no reason not to get on the air. There's so many easy solutions. That's not an easy one, but anyway, but I really do like the little fiberglass poles because they're easy to put up and take down. They're very inexpensive and
It works well with the headphone J pole as well.
yes,
That's what
yeah,
I put up
you
on
can
mine.
push one up real easy with that. And you can, I mean, there's nothing to stop you from hanging a dipole on it. I mean, we're here talking about verticals, but at about 24 feet or so, this pole will support a typical dipole. You get above that and it's a little bit flippy. It doesn't like to do that, but you can get in the air pretty good with it, just leaving out the top two elements, and that's about that much length it lose. So the other thing that I haven't done yet, and I'm about to do for Mark, is one of these 20-foot poles with a set of plates. We're going to build an L, a 40-meter L, inverted L, and give it 40, 20, 15, 17. He'll get 15 off the 40, 12, 10, and probably 6, all on a 20-foot pole. And that should be a lot of fun. This guy stands in the wind with only one set of guy lines. All the heavy wind that we had recently, I had one set in the backyard and it never had a problem. Just, and again, that's only one set of guys. And, or as Channel Master calls it, person plates,
You seen that
person
PAC
lines.
Have you seen that PAC 12 I've been running? The stake in the ground?
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool too.
Oh, man, it's fantastic.
Yeah, but the vertical doesn't take much of a footprint. That's the nice thing. I've got room for 80-meter in the backyard easily, but it's just so much easier to set that vertical pole up to get very, very comparable performance. And at this point, I don't foresee changing much down the road. I don't think I appreciate the guys with the towers and the beams, and I think that's awesome, but for the rest of us, not having to climb, I like these.
Any other questions for Ken? Well, we want to thank him today for talking about vertical and DX standards and stuff. Gives you something to think about as far as a quick and easy antenna to put up in the yard. Some you can leave permanent, like he says, in your backyard. If you want to set up a quick one to run for a weekend contest, there you go. 10-minute quick setup, you know, you're ready to go. Talk to the world.